One moment. All right, there we go. So I just want to call in order the business functions meeting of the Exeter Township Board of School Directors. This evening, we're going to be talking about a limited amount of things, primarily focusing on our capital projects that are in the current budget proposal for next year, as well as the potential to add additional borrowing in terms of one of our refinances that we're expected to do later this summer. And the intention for those additional dollars would be for further capital projects that we would have either next year or in the near future. Before we get started with that, one thing I did want to take the opportunity to do is give any of the administrators, board members, or the, I think we have one member of the public, Mr. Don Hadley. Thank you for coming this evening. And for all those on YouTube as well, thank you for joining us. So I just want to give anybody who would want to take it 1 minute to just kind of see where, discuss where they see things in light of some of the economic outfall or fallout that's happening in light of the virus situation, and how we should be using that to think about any changes if we decide to make any in terms of the discussions we've been having around the budget. So I just want to open it up to anybody who wants to take that opportunity, and then we'll get started right in the PowerPoint for the capital projects. Hearing that there aren't any, Anne, were you about to say something?
Well, I don't think any of us really know what the fallout is at this point. I guess my new favorite word is essential, because we're speaking that every day. So I think when we're looking at the capital projects, keeping that in mind, you know, what is essential, what's needed, but also realizing that now is a good opportunity, as long as rates stay low, to issue new money for those projects that are essential.
I appreciate you sharing that. I did receive 2 emails. One was sent to the entire board, and then one was sent to me from the group that we've had attending business functions regularly so far. Just encouraging the board to consider, one, not raising taxes. And in one case, one of those emails was looking for the district to consider spending decreases to control our budget. And then the other was imploring the board to not raise taxes and at the same time maintain the same level of service that we're providing to the students. So, you know, I think we're going to have some challenging conversations in the next couple of months. And I think we're both up for it and not excited about it either. But I think that we're heading in a good direction. I'm sure that tonight's discussion is going to bear some fruit as well. And I'm just eager to get that process started. And before I turn it over to you for the capital projects, was there any news on a delay of the budget being due on June 30th?
No, not at this point. The Act 1 timeline hasn't been changed as of now.
Okay. Were there any discussions in terms of any amendments to legislation? Because I thought that I saw something about that, maybe either from PSBA or Dr. Phillips, but I'm not sure where that stands.
Sure. We had another meeting, Zoom conference this morning. State Bill 613, the property tax freeze, that amendment did not go through. It is not done though, but they didn't have enough votes in the House Appropriations Committee. They are trying to establish a COVID-19 task force down in Harrisburg. There's a growing sense that there's not a balance of the health issues and the economic landscape. So the function of the COVID-19 task force would be to try and look at the economic impacts of Pennsylvania and try to steer a clear path to move forward while we're still trying to battle the health issues. State Bill 840 or Senate Bill 841 is being discussed. It would give local governments the ability to waive any kind of fees or late payments. It's not been signed into law, but they are looking at moving back the payments till August 31st without any late payment fees. One thing that was noted is if you pay your taxes to a mortgage company, that is not covered in this. So you will still have to pay your mortgage to the company, and they would still need to pay on time. We got a little bit more clarity from and again, all this information changes daily, hourly. We got a little more clarity in that at this point, there had been some rumors about talks of reducing education funding down in Harrisburg. That is not being discussed. It's a safe bet there will be no increase, and we're mostly looking at a flat line, if anything, of what we got last year. There is some discussion as well down in Harrisburg that instead of putting a years-long budget together, doing a 6-month budget, see what that bears fruit, and then putting together another 6-month budget. So there's a lot of buzz going on in Harrisburg on how to tackle this from the economic end as well. That came this morning.
Well, I was going to ask a question. I'll circle back to it at the end. Ann, do you want to go ahead and start presenting on the capital projects that we have in this budget, and then discuss from there?
Yeah, before I do that, on Tuesday, the 14th, there is going to be a webcast with PASBO on building the 2021 budget under all this uncertainty. And I will be putting together a worst case scenario budget based, with some modified assumptions. Okay.
Well, that was going to be my question, so now I don't have to circle back to it at the end. Thank you.
Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The first slide is looking at general fund. If you recall, in the last general fund budget presentation, I referenced $312,000 in the general fund for smaller capital projects. As you know, we have a fund balance commitment, which is some of the fund balance is being directed towards capital projects. The very top, that's $1,269,000. What's slated for 2021 are all listed there. And Rob, you can feel free to chime in where you feel it's needed. But these are the things that have been on our capital project list. And the plan is to move ahead with these in 2021 as part of the general fund, unless of course we decide otherwise as the weeks go on. So if we utilize $312,000 in 2021, there remains a balance of $957,000 approximately of that commitment. And there are a lot of different kinds of smaller capital projects that crop up on an annual basis. And if we go through that plan, there are about $450,000 identified specifically from 21, 22 through 25, 26. But I'd like to emphasize that these things crop up annually, things that principals recognize in their buildings that are needed, things Rob recognizes that need to be taken care of. So I list some examples there: regrading of the soccer field, replacing rusting fence, heat pump replacements, parking lot resurfacing. So, the plan is to use this committed fund balance over the next several years to take care of these smaller projects.
And can I just jump in quick?
Sure.
For people who have questions, what would be the easiest way to handle that? Would it be easier for us to wait until the end, or just jump in as we have questions?
You can jump in if you have questions.
Okay. I guess for myself, for Lorraine and Rifton's projects, as well as the senior high sidewalk one, I'm wondering if those are essential. Exclude from there the replacing of the heat pumps. I can see it occurs to me why there would be value in doing that, especially in light of these situations. But these other ones, you know, I think it's probably fair to say that they would continue to deteriorate. Would they deteriorate in such a way that they can't be held off a year until we have a further grasp of what this fallout is going to look like?
Rob, would you like to add anything?
Rob, you're muted right
there. We go. Sorry, click didn't count. Things like carpeting and stuff like that can definitely be pushed if it needs to be. Things like the sidewalk along 37th Street and playground equipment, things of that nature. That has safety implications to it. So it's in our best interest to address that as soon as we possibly can. So, can we live with it for another year? I'd rather not. So,
does that apply to the hard play surface at Lorraine as well?
The hard play surface at Lorraine is more of a cosmetic issue.
Okay.
You know, with the cracking of the surface. I mean, I guess, it could be a trip hazard. You know, we'd come up through there and stuff like that. It's in pretty bad shape or it wouldn't be on the list. So, but, in general, a lot of the times our project will have a safety focus on it, as well as a building, maintaining the building like the heat pumps.
Well, based on that, and I'd love to get some feedback from anybody else who has issues, I would be in favor of scratching the carpet replacement just as a first round. Does anybody have concerns with that?
I guess
no.
my question is it being replaced because it's discolored, worn, or is it torn or even in a condition that might be a safety hazard?
At Rifton, it's a cosmetic issue. It's not. There's no inherent danger. Lorraine's another story. Lorraine's got carpet tiles and things of that nature that come up. I know we've been systematically replacing carpeting in Lorraine, and Jacksonville is starting to become an issue too. So in those two schools, I would say it may be a safety issue, but for Rifton, no.
Okay. John, do you have any issues with that?
No. I do have one question though, Rob. Are any of these projects from previous year's lists, or are these all new for this budget?
There's recurring things every year. The playground equipment and the carpeting, there's usually money set aside each year to pick away at that. So
okay,
but
thank you.
The other ones are new.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
What did you say about the replace new playground equipment?
What was that?
There isn't it. It says new playground equipment. Did you say that was something that was essential? Did I miss that? Oh, what did you say about it?
Use the new playground equipment. That usually means either new equipment or repairing existing equipment. So.
What do you mean, like balls, or what kind of equipment?
No, the structures.
The what?
That would be like monkey bars and swings and those types of things. The physical plant of the playground equipment.
Oh, okay. Did you say that was essential, or is that something could wait?
Um,
I'm using Ann's word, essential.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, we keep up on the playground repairs, so I'm not aware of any things over there that might require that expenditure. I'd have to go over and check it out to be sure, but I like to have that in there in case we do need to replace equipment. Slides crack, uh, things break on that. So, I would say I would rather have that in there if I needed it for to repair things if they needed to be repaired.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Would there be any, sorry, Dave.
Go ahead.
Would there be any wisdom in having a more discretionary emergency repairs account, and we use some of the savings from removing some of these projects? I guess if I was to give an example, to say an emergency discretionary capital improvement fund of, or maybe not fund, but line item of $100,000, and then we delay most of these projects, because I guess I'm wondering if they need some further review to see if they're truly essential right now, but I want to be responsive to some of your concerns as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, that would be better than what I have now, because of many a times things fail during the school year, and that comes out of my general maintenance.
But Rob, what I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Aarons, I think what Mr. Aarons is saying is we wouldn't be doing these, and we would delay everything into that 100,000. You mentioned there's some safety issues there. Can you at least redline the safety issues for us, that we know what needs to be done? Which of these are safety issues? You had mentioned that a little early on.
There's just sporadically through certain pieces of equipment need to be maintained. They wear out, they crack. So that's what that money's there for. The new playground equipment, that's not necessarily new. That might just be replacing pieces on an existing structure.
No, I understand, but in the piece of paper we're looking at right now, you had mentioned earlier that there are some safety issues here that you don't want to wait on. Which of these were you suggesting we don't wait on?
The top ones for me are the sidewalk replacements at the senior high and Rifton. Those are where I was referencing that it's a safety issue. Obviously the playgrounds need to be in order and functional. I would have to look further into exactly what issues there are at that Rifton playground.
So to be clear, there's $71,000 worth of sidewalks that are a safety concern. Everything else, as Mr. Aaron said, can be pushed back.
No, my heat pumps.
And we could, well, I'm sorry?
The heat pumps.
Well, then, okay, now we're at 147.
How about,
did a quick math.
Could we reduce this by $100,000 and say that the rest of the funds are more flexible for the projects as you need them through the year? Because I'm seeing 100,000 amongst hard play, office equipment, office carpet, new playground equipment. So, I think making it a more flexible account, unless, Ann, you have some concerns about that, and reducing it overall would give us some more flexibility, as well as save some dollars and delay some of these projects.
No, I don't have any issue with it. I mean, the whole point of a commitment is to be flexible. And if you recall, this year, there's only 137,000 that we used. We removed a lot of things in the current year to help with the budget, maintain some flexibility. So if we want to bring this down and delay, we can do that.
I'm inclined to do that. Do other board members have concerns about that?
I like that idea.
Yeah, I think considering some of the indefinites we're dealing with right now, with revenue and finance in general, if we can hold off a little bit. I mean, I don't want to see things go too long. I don't like to see playground equipment that's in disrepair or not functional or dangerous in any way. And obviously, you know, while I don't necessarily think we have to worry so much about aesthetics, but carpets and that sort of thing, you know, are a consideration at a certain point. So I wouldn't cross it off the list. I guess my opinion would be, you know, if we can delay that maybe might be the best move at this point.
Yeah. Sharon, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just about to. I'm not sure if I'm clear on what you're saying, that you would take it out of the budget but put it in like some kind of emergency.
So
I'm not clear on what you're gonna.
Yeah, thank you for that follow-up
Yeah, you're gonna
question.
take it out and then delay it, but is it still going to be in the budget?
So what I'm suggesting is that we would say the total capital projects as listed on this sheet is $312,000. Let's take $100,000 out of that, bring it down to $212,000, and make the heat pumps and the sidewalks the priority, and then the rest of that money, I'd have to do quick math myself. So there's 71 in sidewalk, there's 76, so 157.
147.
Okay. 147. So there would be a 147 of our priority projects, and then the rest of it would be discretionary funds that the facilities team could use within the budget framework for whatever crops up over the year. That is a capital improvement as opposed to a maintenance improvement.
How do we feel about the security gates in the Eagle lobby for the $25,000? I know Tom Campbell has been asking for that as a way to secure the building when we have events in the auditorium.
Okay, so Eagle, which one is the Eagle lobby then?
When you first come in the building, the big doors right around the circle?
No, the one down by the cafeteria with the big wooden eagle statue in it. That's referred to as the Eagle lobby.
So
is he unable to secure them now? Is that, you said that would enable him to secure them. So what's the status of it now?
It's just he's trying to limit access as people come in for athletic events, especially limit access to other sections of the building.
Oh, okay.
I guess
I think it's a safety and security issue, and I would support it. That's Dave.
I would agree that it's a safety and security issue. I guess I've never really had any concerns about people walking around the building at the last event I was at because they already have rolling gates.
Well, it's not that. We've had concerns in the building with people wandering.
May not have enough.
So just so I'm clear, there are no
staff there for.
There's no rolling gate there now?
Correct.
Okay.
Don't we have game day staff there to ensure that people aren't wandering around the buildings?
I'm not sure. I can't speak to that.
It's my understanding that the athletics department pays for security staff, not security as in I'm carrying a weapon or anything, but monitors at the games to monitor the crowd.
That would be correct, but not the hallways. If someone decides to sneak out a hallway, there is no real way to limit their access.
But are these staff not watching the lobby where everybody is coming down for the game?
Again, I'm going to say what Rob said. We're not going to be able to answer it directly, but I would believe that would be their priority at that point. They're watching who comes in the game and how the crowd reacts.
Okay. Why don't we keep it in then? I guess my concern, and I'm sorry, John, I cut you off again. My big concern is anytime we say it's a safety issue, therefore it automatically grabs funding. And I guess when I'm looking at this, and I don't want this to be our pattern, is anytime somebody says it's a security or a safety issue, we automatically fund it. Because I think we're all aware of what can happen if we're not paying attention to that. But are we paying too little attention to it right now that we can cover these concerns with things that we already have? And I'm not going to try and answer that here because you guys are in the building, you know more than I do. That's just my concern at this point. John, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, are there other ways to achieve this than spending $25,000? For example, I would be delighted to volunteer at a sporting event. Somebody tell me where to go and what hallway to not to let people pass by, and I'll be glad to spend an evening doing that. And I would imagine we could ask staff, and my guess is that other board members would be delighted to take care of that, and then we save $25,000.
I just spoke to the athletic director. Well, I didn't speak. I texted the athletic director. He says they can watch the hallways. We could take the $25,000 out.
Okay, thank you.
And have we delayed you enough? Because I think you're ready to move on. And I think the verbal consensus was to take 100,000 out of that and move the non-priorities into a discretionary account that Rob can use for capital improvements. It wouldn't be a part of that maintenance line item. If anybody has concerns about what I just said, speak now, or we can move on to the next slide.
That's fine with me as long as it's okay with Ann.
Oh, it's fine with me.
Okay.
Looks like I have a problem with this slide. Just bear with me a second. Just give me a second. I apologize. And the slide got cut off. So the second slide is actually the capital project funds. We have our capital reserve, Fund 32, which funds build up through transfers from the general fund, if there are excess funds in the general fund. In prior years, and it's a best practice among school districts to move funds into a capital reserve fund to have funds available for projects. Fund 33 is the balance of additional capital funds. That's the new money issued, $3.5 million in 2019. Fund 39 was also new money from 2014, and that's remaining. Fund 39 will be spending that down with the projects that we're doing this year. The first column is 2019-20. We started the year with about 9.8 million, all three funds combined. In interest income, approximately 150,000. The projects that we paid out of capital funds are listed there. And I've identified, the specific fund that we took them from. As you can see, a lot of the, this is roof restoration. My rows got cut off there at the senior high school, which was completed. Right now, we're working on the junior high chiller plant and piping. That project is going on right now. Maybe if Rob wants to update you on that, he can, but that should be completed in time. I think in May was your last report when that would be completed. We owe KCBA some fees for the 2019 projects. That'll be paid this year. We purchased Lorraine playground equipment, some additional pieces this year. So in total, about $1,854,000. So we'll end the year at a little over 8 million. So going into 2021, just a guesstimate of what the interest will be. I don't know where rates are going to go yet. This is the junior Jackson Wald and Lorraine unit ventilators, $3.5 million. Those bids were awarded. Things are in progress as far as gearing up for acquiring those ventilators and any work that needs to be done. That is essential work that will go on during the summer. In February, when we talked about, okay, let's look at what we need, rates are good, we reached out to principals and, asked what additional things do you think that you need, or they added something, as a budget impact form. And these kind of came after the original general fund budget list. So I'm listing them there as being paid out of capital reserve if we are actually going to do them. The senior high and Lorraine have asked for extensive painting in their buildings. Mr. Hogarth has asked for wall mats to be replaced in the senior high school gyms, both gyms. Again, Jackson Wald, they need some replacement or repaired playground equipment. Lorraine, Rob mentioned this, carpet replacement. And Lorraine has also asked for key fob access to various exterior doors. So they kind of came after the general fund number that we worked on. So I've added them into this list as potentially coming out of capital reserve. And just to mention, this 3.5 million will deplete almost all of Fund 33. That was the 2019 issuance of new money of 3.5 million. And 39 will be depleted by all of these projects. Sorry about that. Where am I? That we're paying for this year. Are there any questions? So we'll end up, next year we'll spend 3.7 million and ending up with capital, essentially the capital reserve fund of about 4.6 million.
I'm just going to continue the theme that I was talking about in the previous slide. Some of these bottom pieces with painting, wall mats, playground equipment. I think, Rob, you spoke to the carpet replacement, so I'm going to set that one aside. And the key fob access, are these really essential? I'm looking at the security concern of what I'm guessing are gym or recess groups or somebody else who might be outside for an get back into the nearest door into the building rather than walk into the front office. I have a misperception there. $5 in light of what we're looking at right now. That's not a change to the current practice. I would say take that off. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to any of those comments, but I would just ask at this point, my preference would be for the administration to go back and look a little bit harder at these and see if these are essential and if these can be delayed in a similar fashion to what we just did. I'm not saying that we can't use any of the money. Maybe we want to make a larger flexible discretionary account than the 212 we talked about and then fund that from some of the savings that we'll have in these capital reserve funds, because the general fund is maybe a little bit easier to work to what we might need throughout the year. But I guess I just don't see an immense amount of value in all these right now.
I've got a question about the painting at the high school in Lorraine. Is that painting that's going to replace great swaths of chipped paint, or is it just we want to put a new color of paint, coat of paint on the walls?
Maybe somewhere in the middle. I mean, it's not,
okay.
It doesn't look run down or anything, but, it's showing its age, and, we don't have, my maintenance guys don't have the time, throughout the school year, especially during the summer with projects going on. I really don't have the staff that can sit there and just paint rooms. So really what I've been doing, basically every summer since I got here in 2016 is I get those rooms where it is peeling and there is an issue. and I have a contractor come in and take care of it. But that's on a pretty small scale. And in those two schools, you know, the administration of those schools is asking for like large scale painting projects, like hallways, you know, throughout the building and things of that nature. So,
Right. Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't say that that is, you know, appearances are important, but, you know, essential, you know, I don't know if I can speak to that.
Okay.
And the same thing with the fob access. I believe that was for Lorraine. You know, they have a considerable amount of fob access over there on, you know, different sides of the building. It's just not some of the doors that lead out to the playground areas, and there's a few of them. Some of them don't have the fob access. That's the reason for the request there.
You know, I look at some of these amounts and it's, you know, 25,000 for the fob and 60 for the painting, and say, well, that's really a drop in the bucket when you're talking about an $80 million budget. But to paraphrase Edward Dirksen from 50 years ago, you know, $1 billion here and $1 billion there, and pretty soon you're talking about big money. We're not talking billions here, but 10,000 here, 20,000 here. Here's a $60,000 amount for painting. It's starting to add up. If you take the 60 and the 25 for the fob, there's 85. The wall mats, I don't know if that's, again, I don't know if you know, Rob, are they falling apart, or are they just, it would be nice to replace them?
That may be more cosmetic. I'd have to check. I know my guys this year during the school year did some work on the mats in the Hawks gym where they were coming down. So, you know, they were repaired in-house. So I don't know if, you know, I don't know if they're at the end of their life cycle or not. Okay. How much padding the padding has, you know, whether that's going to be an issue or not. But, you know, I'd have to talk to Tom Legaff a little bit more about that.
Okay, so there you've got those three items. You've got $105,000, if my math is right. Now we're starting to talk some, you know, a six-figure amount. Just throwing that out there. I'm not saying don't do them, but maybe not do them this year.
Right.
And you know, suffer through it another year when the scourge has passed and we have more answers to our financial questions. That's the only point I wanted to make.
I know when I look at some of the items that are listed there, I initially go to, are there any that if we don't do them, it's going to have a significant impact on large numbers of students in that respective building? And when I look at Lorraine and I look at the carpet replacement, I know a lot of the carpet over there is peeling up. You know, we've all been around elementary kids. You know, little kids tend to run, tend to not always pay attention to where they're going. You have a lot of carpet peeling up. You've got kids tripping. You've got potential issues, you know, with that. You also have potential mold, moisture issues, you know, that kind of thing. And when I look at the playground equipment at Jackson Wald, potentially, depending on what the repairs are there, you've got all of our students at Jackson Wald that use that equipment when we're outside for recess. So if I were prioritizing out of those items, you know, one or two areas that I would say we should keep, that's where my mind initially goes to. Mr. Fiddler, I tend to agree with you about some of the other items, the painting, the wall mats, the key fob. Not that those things aren't important. I think they are, but I think they could wait.
Right. I'm not saying that either, that they're not important, but I think if we go back to the very beginning with Ann's word essential, or these essential, I think that might be one of the test questions that we ask about these items.
So on this one, because I do want to make sure that we get through all these slides, and I'm I'm already betting that we won't. Anne, could you include this grouping about what the administration is going to do, either in an email follow-up to us or in a presentation to the whole board? I think the next one is the 14th. I think it's the 14th. I might be doing that wrong.
Correct. Okay. Can you see this slide, everyone? Kind of cut off for me, but in any event, these are carrying over a capital project fund balance of 4.6 million approximately, and looking to the next 3 to 4 years. And why are we looking at that? Well, we have to start thinking about issuing new money to pay for projects. The first one, junior high, unit ventilator replacement. Originally on our facility study done by KCBA, they had these replacements in the out years, doing a little bit each year. We've talked about this before, about moving it up and really getting it done. We need a new estimate on this, but right now, to do that building, all the unit ventilators, is about 1.9 million. The senior high track replacement, which would be a 10-year life, is about 600,000. That was originally done back, the last work on it, 2014. And then speaking with Mr. Legath and Mr. Berzui, talked to him today also, this does need to be done. That's what they've said. There's also discussion about should it be done possibly this summer because of the condition, but I probably will have more discussion about that. 22, 23, now this was in the long-range plan, replace auditorium seating. I'm not sure if that's essential. That's probably one that we could go back and look at. Senior high, replace the cooling tower and service chillers, 240,000. And the senior high, another project to replace the spalling concrete west of Lot E, 256,000. And then Lorraine, replace burners and pumps, have alternate replacement boilers, 166,000, 167. So in 22, 23, it's a total of 992,000. There were no major projects listed on our long-range plan for 23, 24. And 24, 25, looking at redoing the stadium infield and the carpet that was done in 2014, 600,000, and junior high, replacing boiler burners and pumps, 144,000. So adding that all up, going through 20 years, 24, 25, it's 4.3 million approximately, essentially using all of our capital project funds if these were done. Any questions?
I don't have a question, Ann, but to the question that you pose in here, and I'm not sure if that was more hypothetical or if that was trying to get some direction from us, and maybe we can have a larger discussion around this if need be, because I know that the track is a highly visible issue. I would not be inclined to move it to this summer. I don't see where that fits in. I know if we have to get to the end of the year and we're looking at expenses to be reduced, I don't think that's going to be well received to prioritize that in light of this situation. So that would be my response at this point.
I just have one question because I don't know what it is. What is a unit ventilator?
It's the unit in the classroom that heats and cools.
Oh, okay.
That's my simple understanding of it. Rob, is it?
You nailed it.
Anything more than that?
That is exactly what it is. It's the individual heating and cooling units in each classroom.
Okay. So basically we're talking about what, dozens of them?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And that's what we're doing at Lorraine and Jacksonville this summer. So finishing off that part of the project.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And do we have any general obligation notes that will be retired completely in this time frame through 2024-2025 school year?
Well, I'll show you. You're talking about the bonds?
Yes.
We'll get to that in a couple slides.
Okay.
Okay. So projects requiring further review, things which we've put on the back burner, things which, are brought to our attention. and, you know, outstanding issues like the transportation center. So the weatherproofing, we put that on the back burner. KCBA, when they did the facility study, for each building except Owatton, they had recommended different things. We don't know, I don't know at this point, with, you know, focusing on the current projects, we haven't revisited this yet. But I didn't want it to fall off our radar, because if there is indeed an opportunity to weatherproof and save on utilities, we need to look at that. But dehumidification in the team rooms in the high school, that's been brought up, as well as Mr. Campbell's brought up other areas. Am I correct, Rob?
Yes.
Yeah. So that would require additional studies on what the issue is and how to resolve it. A couple others we put on the back burner, the well field at Rifton, flushing and refilling, as well as looking at system performance. Again, not wanting them to fall off the radar, they're on this list. Owatton principal has requested another playground recently because of the number of students. It's just not sufficient. We also have to keep in mind, and we don't have numbers, we need to come up with a security camera replacement cycle. We also have to replace analog security cameras. The life of the cameras typically is 5 years. So trying to work with the technology department on how that fits in to a capital project budget. The transportation center is a big question mark. In 2014, we were probably looking at a project about 3.4 million. We started discussions today about, let's really look at the scope and kind of reset and, you know, discuss going forward with the board on the direction of that. But that, I think we all realize we need to do something now that we're staying district operated, and the current site is not at all acceptable. So that will be a significant project cost. The administration building, I think we're going to move ahead and maybe start looking at the HVAC system. You know, we've looked at the configuration of the offices itself, but looking at the HVAC, I think, is a priority before taking a next step in any other area. And this, you know, is kind of the high school wish list, additional turf field. So adding all those is about 2.2 million. And going on to the next slide, really just summarizing, you know, where we started at the end of last fiscal year, 9.8 million, what we'll spend each year based on what I just showed you through 22-23, that's well, the balance after subtracting all that spending is 2.8 million. That's what will remain in capital funds. And of course, you know, we've talked about removing some of those things, and I'll adjust these numbers. Projects that need further review, 2.2 million approximately. But then again, that does not include anything for the transportation center or the admin HVAC.
And can I ask a question about that? You said it was 3.4 million. Is it for the transportation center? Did I hear that right? I said in 2014, that was the cost, but we are resetting and trying to look at the scope, reducing some of the scope, but also keep in mind most of that cost is related to site work, but we are looking at the scope of the actual facility itself. And there are some options as far as site work, some alternates, having a stone parking area versus asphalt. So
we will obviously be, looking for approval from the board to start, resetting and, looking at, starting at different plans or revised plans.
So
But
was
in
that
any event, I just wanted to give you perspective.
Was the 3.4 million when they were looking at building one on Watton Creek? Is that where
Correct.
that number? Okay. So now it's just to renovate the current facility.
No. We're looking at a Watton Creek, 3.4 million a Watton Creek was a Watton Creek.
For the transportation?
Back in 2014.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Back then you were looking at a Watton Creek, but what are we looking at now? Like an amount to renovate?
We will be looking for direction from the board to revisit a Watton Creek.
Okay.
Yeah, Sharon, just a little background, and this is primarily, I think, from what the facilities committee has been discussing thus far, and what I was able to find out regarding as the Township Borough liaison. I think the administration is trying to put together a plan at the board's direction for updates to the facility or a new facility to continue operating the transportation center by the district, and we're still in the preliminary stages of formulating a plan. And I think what Ann, you're doing is trying to give us an idea of what that would cost in terms of our long-term commitments.
Correct.
And this is Dave. I have a question about the additional turf field. I'm assuming that would that be the stadium field that we're talking about, or is this one in addition to stadium?
You know how this I think originated. Well, I think the athletic department has always had or felt there was a need for an additional turf field. I'm told that other districts, have more than one. But after the February facility meeting, I think maybe there was some discussion about, well, just bring it forward. If the district's looking at issuing new money, bring forward the projects that you feel that are needed. And obviously from the athletic department's point of view and the use of the fields, how heavily they're used, they are a proponent of an additional turf field. So I put it on here. Now the whole climate has changed, but really out of respect of what people think that they need, or what they feel is important in their area of responsibility, I've put it on here.
Well, what about the current field? I think that's kind of getting a little old. From what I can tell, it looks like it may be at some point coming to the end of its functional life.
I'll go back a slide, and in 24-25, that'll be up for redoing that infield and carpet at a cost of $600,000.
And I spoke with Tom today about those turf fields. He says that current field is in decent shape, and we should be able to make that 24-25 goal of keeping it till then. I mean, he was really stumping for his additional field, which would probably be in the Herbine field area. That's where he's like to put it. So.
And just so make sure I'm following this would be for what purpose? Baseball, football, soccer, or everything?
It wouldn't be baseball. It would be a similar field in size and shape to the current stadium, except it wouldn't have all the bells and whistles there. There would be no lights, so it would only be used during the daytime, but it would relieve the stress on the current field as well. So
you would be able to use it for soccer, for field hockey,
yes,
lacrosse, practices if needed be for those types of sports.
So it could be used for competitions.
Yes.
Okay.
You would have limited spectator seating, but yes.
So these are all things for future project reviews, but are none of these, you're not looking at any of these for 2021, or are you looking for any of these for that year, for next year budget?
No, we're not looking at any of these for 2021. They all require additional work. I can't, well, I guess it depends where we, what progress we make with the administration building, HVAC, and that'll be discussed preliminarily at a facility committee meeting, and also where the direction we go with the transportation center. I mean, obviously 2021, if anything happens with the transportation center, that'll be a lot of planning, and that work would not take place. I'm not sure about the administration building at this point, but the other ones, we're not going to be doing those, as far as I know. Correct, Rob?
Correct.
We need further evaluation.
Yes.
So, and this is really just, all of this is, number one, we'll approve a capital project budget for 2021, but looking to the future and what our needs are. So if we have a balance remaining after 23-24 of 2.8 million, and potential projects of anywhere from 2 million to, I would say, 5 million, 6 million, if you throw in, those unknown figures, or, and then what we still have in our long range plan for 24-25 through 27-28 of a little over $1 million, and then maintaining a capital reserve balance of 3 million. So just doing the math there, we need 3.4 million, and that's not including the transportation center or anything done at the administration building. So just giving you an idea of what additional new money in August would be at least 3.3 million. Of course, that could be modified by removing some things, but also it'll increase because of the transportation center and the admin building. So why don't we move on to the last two slides, or three, which really shows our current obligation at this point, our debt service. The net for next year is 7.8 million, and it's pretty level up until, it does drop off in 2029. The scenarios that I asked Jamie to look at if we would borrow, and again, these are just scenarios, a little under 10 million or 6 million. Option 1, 10 million, option 2, 6 million. And a 12-year maturity, and it's a wrap to kind of keep your local effort consistent in some years. So just looking at the 6 million option, what's in red, this number, 163,000 in 2021, is what would be added to debt service. And then the larger payments of paying back principal are all in the out years from 2029 through 2032. So, Hunter, you were asking before about debt that's retiring. It is in 2028, but then issuing new money, it's really adding on to those additional 4 years approximately. Does anyone have any questions about that? Now, again, this does not reflect any potential future refunding savings. If you recall what I went over, I believe it was in early March, the potential for a spring refunding. Right now, it's looking at a savings of 500,000. I think back then it was about 820,000. So there will be, I don't have a schedule on that, but there will be potential savings to reduce or have a net offset to this additional debt service, and also the 2012, which would be in August of 2020, those savings would be more significant, and a lot of that will be taken, up front. So basically what I'm trying to say is any refunding savings will offset these additional amounts, especially through year 2028, because that's how we'll take those savings. Are there any questions?
Yes,
And sorry.
pardon my lack of familiarity here again. The column proposed local effort, and then next door is the total local effort. What do those phrases mean?
The proposed local effort would be the additional debt service of interest and principal that we would incur if we had issued new money. So
Okay.
this 163,000 and everything listed down below it relates to issuing new money of 6 million.
Got it. Okay. And then the total local effort.
That represents what our total debt service is on an annual basis.
Oh, okay. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
And option 2 and option 1, those principal amounts, do they contain what we would be refinancing, or I'm missing the context.
Yeah, the footnote there is it does not reflect any potential future refunding savings. So what I probably did poorly in explaining was this is what these numbers you would add to your debt service, but the refunding savings and how we take them over the period of 2021 through 2028 will reduce it to a degree. And
so
So for example, if we would look at, say, $6 million, and in 2021, it's additional debt of 163,000, and looking at, and this goes back to, let's see if I have older numbers. Yeah. The last presentation that Jamie had given me had indicated that the spring refunding had savings of 820,000. Right now it's down to 500,000 because the rates really have been all over the place, but right now it's showing 500,000 in total. But what we'll take in 2021 would probably be about 70,000. So that 70,000 would offset the 163,000. But then we also have the August refunding, which back in early March had savings of over $1 million. And in that first year, if we're saying it's going to be half of that, there could be over 200,000 in interest savings in that year. So you could essentially still have a net savings to your debt service if those refundings do provide that level of savings. Do you understand that?
Yeah, let me ask a follow-up.
Without having it in black and white.
Yeah, let me just ask a question to make sure that I do understand this. So when we're talking about new money, maybe that will come at the same time that we're doing our refinancing. But if we're refinancing, let's say $10 million, we are not going to lump new money into that and say, instead of refinancing 10 million, we're refinancing 15 million. These are separating them. So at the same time that we're refinancing the 10 million, we're issuing 5 more million or 6 million using option 2. I probably should have done it that way. Is that correct? So they're separate. They're not the same pile of money.
Right. The plan at this point is if the decision is made to issue new money, that will be done with the refunding in August. and that is the refunding of the 2012A issue. That's over 19 million that we'll be refunding. We'll be adding in new money to that issue.
What is the downside of not issuing new money when you're doing this refinancing or refunding?
The one in the spring?
Or the one in August. So
No,
what is the
we're
downside?
doing it together.
We're doing it together.
It'll be
When you say
one
we're
transaction.
Okay. But I guess my question is, what is the downside of us not doing new money this period of time, what we're going to do this summer or this spring, and waiting a year, 2 years?
Oh, the downside of waiting to issue new money? The rates. You don't know what is going to happen to the rates. Also, you'll be paying the closing costs associated with an issuance, which could be about 100,000.
Okay.
Ann, I'm wearing my taxpayer hat. Is there a way to translate these numbers into what the taxpayer would see on his bill? Let me illustrate that with an example. When I was at the newspaper, every time we wrote a school board story when there was a tax increase, we would say that the tax increase would affect the average homeowner with $100,000 property value to $100,000 by X dollars. I don't know if we can do that here, but is there a way to sort of bring these numbers, make them more palatable to the average person by saying, if we borrow this money, here's what you're going to see on your tax bill. I think of it as like a pie chart. How big of a slice of the pie, if the pie chart represents 100% of the taxpayer's bill, how big is that slice representing the debt service each year? Is that possible?
I think what's important to show the school board and the public is, I will ask Jamie to run the savings as they look right now for the first refunding that we'll be moving ahead with in the spring, as well as what's in the summer, and just really looking at what the potential savings are and put it side by side with these options. And then you will see the net impact on debt service. In some years, in the early years, and it depends on when you take your savings, our total local effort may go down. In later years, when there's not as much savings on the refundings, our total local effort may go up. And I can surely illustrate that in a simple way of how much is this in terms of a mill and what it adds to our millage.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great.
So, Ann, is this the last slide in your presentation?
There is.
Okay. All right. I guess my feeling would be that I don't see the need right now to borrow new money. We're going to have to make a decision about the transportation center, and that's going to be a significant investment. And I would think that that would be the more appropriate time to add additional monies for any of these new projects that we haven't fully vetted at this point. And the underlying reason I say that is I think as a philosophy around how we want to continue using debt service in the future, if we even had 1 or 2 years where we are able to realize $1 million, $2 million, maybe even $4 million in 2029, whenever that board is, of that debt service falling off and being able to use our own money to fund these projects in the long term. And I get that you won't be able to fund all these projects in the long term, but even if you had 1 or 2 years where you could take everything that we were paying in debt service with these wraps and just take half of that, so $4 million, and put that into the capital reserves, we would not have to pay interest on millions of dollars of projects because of those savings. And I think we need to start working to protect that and have a better idea of what we're going to be borrowing for. And I just don't think that we have that better idea right now about some of these projects moving forward.
Well, by August, I think we should have a better idea. I would hope we have a better idea about the transportation center.
You don't
think so?
We sure will have a better idea. Whether we have the ability to make a decision at that point, I certainly don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong.
Things at the transportation center that were really dire, like roofs, and I remember hearing things about, some things that may not be able to wait too long. Like, what's the status of that, of the transportation center?
Sharon, I think one of the things that, what we're trying to, what we recognize is that current transportation center is obsolete and insufficient in terms of size for renovation. And so, the focus of what we're doing currently is to kind of reconsidering a different option, which was the option that was first considered back in 2014, which was making an effort to try to build a transportation center brand new at a location on district property to save any additional costs associated with purchase of land, and that would be at Owatton Creek Elementary. So that's kind of where we are right now in terms of the facilities committee and how we've been trying to reformulate that whole idea of the transportation center, what we need. Now that we've made a commitment to our drivers and to our program, we need to have an adequate facility, and a facility that can also accommodate things like natural gas propane fueling, which is clearly not an option if we stay at our current location.
Those facilities, because Owatton Creek is out, right? Wasn't that denied?
We're having conversations right now to try to figure out what remedies there might be for that location. So we're talking to the township.
Dave, do you mind if I jump in there really quick?
Settled, but...
just to give some context around one of the things that Dave just referenced, and Sharon, I think what you're asking about, the order from the judge that we received in the case between the school district and the township was not prohibiting the use of that land for that use. What the decision was based on is the procedure around arriving to that decision by this township zoning hearing board. And what we're exploring at this point is trying to follow the correct procedure as the township has defined it and as how the judge has affirmed that procedure and see if there would be a different result.
If I may, as a quick footnote, the report that was done last year that said that it would be cheaper for us to keep doing what we're doing as opposed to outsourcing it, really had some very good things to say about our program. And I think one of the goals, at least as I see it, 1/9 of the board, is to build a transportation center that reflects that report and reflects the almost world-class status, at least Pennsylvania class status of our transportation program. So that's my 2 cents.
Pennsylvania class is world class. Just want to throw that out there.
There we go.
Well, I guess that's something that we're going to have to continue to think about regarding new money borrowing. I'm not hearing a decision in terms of direction about that tonight, and I don't think the administration was looking for that anyways. But Ann, I appreciate the presentation. Do any of our administrators want to offer any closing thoughts on anything discussed here?
No, other than we are continuing to work on the budget. Again, the figures that we brought forward tonight with Ann were sort of wish list things. I don't know if that's things that we've committed to, but we are looking to get to that magic number that you gave us to work with.
And just one last piece of information. Jamie sent me an email today, Jamie of PFM. He would like to move ahead to send the financing package to the rating agency just to start the process. Like I said, it was right now it's showing 500,000 in savings for the this spring refunding. So unless there's any, I mean, we did talk about that at the last meeting to, keep moving ahead if it's looking like reasonable savings. So he's going ahead.
Go forth. Go forth. Make disciples of all nations. Keep on it.
Are there fees associated with that, Ann? With this step?
That's the one that he talked about, the rating fee. It depends upon the size. I think he had mentioned maybe about 15,000. My memory served it correctly, but it's good for a few months. So it would be good for the August.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Don, do you want to add any closing thoughts? I know you haven't spoken the whole time, so I'm putting
myself. I've been sitting and listening. No, what I would say is that with the current situation and everything else that seems to be happening, I think the 9 of you, 5 of who are here tonight, and 2 administrators, and Ann and Rob, have a difficult years, maybe, of difficult decisions. Just looking at what you have to do to provide education at the highest level, to provide to your staff, to provide to your students and student athletes, and to provide to the community. But I do believe that over time, you're going to have to make some tough decisions. The money's going to run out. You can't keep going back over and over again. I don't know how, and I'm just trying to look at this from my standpoint, but you can refinance all you want and you can save money, but you're still paying that bill. You're not getting whatever, $500,000 back to spend. And probably most of these bond issues don't go to fruition anyway. And you're refinancing down the road. So I admire what you have to do. I'm glad I'm not in the position to have to do it. But do the best you can, but certainly don't be afraid to make the tough decisions and say no. We can't do this at this time. I mean, I'm on the athletic committee and I'd love to see a second turf field. But I don't think in priorities, and Tom won't be happy for me to say this, but in the priorities of what we have on that list, that turf field gets anywhere near the top. You can make a case for having it, but and a strong case, but it doesn't cover all of the other things. You have aging buildings. You have contracts coming up. And so I'm just saying good luck to all of you. And I know you're trying to do the best you can for me as a taxpayer, for the students, for the staff, for the facilities. I'm just glad I'm not the one who's going to have to make that decision. That's it for me, Hunter.
Don, when we have the
I'm looking kind of
angry mob meetings, you're going to have to come out and say that whole spiel over again, okay?
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, Hunter, I'd like to just make a comment too. I mean, I think prior to the current situation that we're in right now with the pandemic and the impact, the economic impact that we realize that it will have, the scope of which we can't really predict. Prior to that, I was absolutely fully committed to doing everything we can to fund all the projects that we were looking at, because I think it's important to kind of maintain our facilities, and knowing that some of these are long-term projects, particularly the transportation center, which should last us for another 30 to 50 years, as well as the work on the Lausch administration building, and how important that is to have a suitable environment for our administrative functions. But with what's happening right now, with the level of uncertainty we have right now, you know, my feelings are really changing, you know, a lot. And I feel much more cautious. I feel much more concerned. And I regret this, because I don't think it's good for us to neglect or ignore the facilities needs that we have. These are all needs that we have. I think these are all necessary. But in Ann's words, are they essential? Are they critical? Are they absolutely important at this point right now, without knowing what our economic future is going to be? I think we have to show I agree with what Don said. I think we have to show some restraint and find, you know, what we can do and what we can't do, until we understand what the real realities are in front of us. And right now, I think it's too early to tell.
Sharon or John, do you guys want to offer any closing thoughts?
I just amen to what Dave said.
You're muted, Sharon.
Yeah, I keep going up to the picture instead of down to the thing at the bottom. But I mean, I agree with that too. I think anything that is not a safety issue, as those things were discussed, should be put on the back burner, because I know that those things are important and aesthetics are important, but I would rather, if we get down to where we have to cut something that affects the academics of the students, I'd rather see some things in facilities that can wait, you know, rather than getting down in the budget and we have to cut some program or cut staff or something. So I'm more in favor of cutting things that do not directly impact the academics of our students.
Well, as we're wrapping up here, you know, the one big closing thought that I have, and it's not necessarily related to capital projects, although indirectly, anytime you're talking about the budget, you're talking about how you're going to fund things, and that's what we're talking about here. I saw a report from Moody's at work, the rating agency, and by their estimates already, our pension funds at a state and local level nationally have lost over $1 trillion of value. And that is, it's going to be catastrophic. I can tell you at work, we're going to see at least a $20,000 increase, and that's very significant for our budget, and paying for our police pension obligations. We're going to see that, I suspect, in our obligations to the Teachers Association and for their pensions, to PESers. And we haven't felt the full effects of all this. And I think that I hear us all being cognizant of that. We also don't want to overreact, because it's certainly easier to think of the worst case scenario than the reality. And there's some evidence that the virus's peak in some states has already hit this week, and ours in Pennsylvania is expected to be later next week, and possibly into the weekend. So we are definitely going to see a light at the end of the tunnel, and we don't want to overreact. And I think we want to be conservative about our approach to this, keeping what we know is good, our academics, our core programming, and progressing forward with what we know we can change and do better on, both financially and academically. And I think that's the approach that we're all taking, and I know that we'll continue to do so. In preparation for the board meeting next week, it is my understanding that the administration is going to be providing that video to the board regarding their budget reduction proposals. and we're going to be receiving that. I'm thinking this weekend. Do you guys have any report on that?
Well, that'll be my focus, to pull things together and then have a meeting with Dr. Phillips and Dr. Winters. Yeah, Monday at the latest. It's just, you know, a lot of our days are spent trying to deal with what's going on, trying to get direction. So I'll definitely do my best.
Okay. Well, this is not only you. This was as far as I understand, the direction was that the administration would provide this. So this is not just you, Ann, and this should be provided Sunday at the latest, because the board needs time to watch this. And this is going to be an extremely monumental task that we're all going to undertake, and we shouldn't go into it without knowing enough. And it's not enough time to get it Monday afternoon for the board to have one day to process it. That is totally outside of what the direction of this video was. And I don't mean to come down on anybody here. I guess I'm just a little bit surprised that that is the progress of it at this point.
No offense, Mr. Ahrens, but we've been working 12 to 14 hours a day and trying to keep day-to-day priorities. And I know Ann's working hard, as well as myself and Dr. Winters. We'll do our best.
What video, what are you talking about? What are you asking for, Hunter? Like what video that we need to have before Tuesday?
The previous business functions meeting, what the business functions committee agreed to, and what was also reported to the board at our voting meeting on the 31st, was that the administration would prepare a pre-recorded video for the board, and that would be shared with the public, detailing the budget reduction proposals that they had come up with, and that they would be presenting in summary on Tuesday night to allow for discussion and a first reaction from the board. That video is intended to be the opportunity for you guys to make the case and help us fully understand the outfall, or I keep saying that, or the fallout from each of the reductions that the administration is proposing. Now, if there is a need to delay that presentation until the voting meeting, I think that discussion should happen right now, because that video, if that video is not going to be provided until Monday, then that is totally counter to what the purpose of that video was supposed to be. It was supposed to be the administration's opportunity to expand in detail and length at what each of those reductions was going to cause to the district. And I guess I'm
Hunter, I'm not
frustrated,
sure what
and I guess that's not entirely fair. And
well, I would like to say a few things. We went through several community meetings, and the outcome of just about every one of them was no direction on, or no prioritization, or we want everything. We met as administrators on February 26th. We walked through what people could support reducing. This list is not overly extensive. I mean, if you want it to be overly extensive, if you are looking for $1 million in cuts, that's where the staffing issue comes in. And we have delayed the whole class size and that issue until next year. So what is going to be provided, whether it's Tuesday the 14th or on the 21st, I'm not sure it's going to measure up to whatever is you're thinking in your mind it's supposed to be.
And I'd just like to say, Hunter, was this a month ago when you asked them to do this video? Because if it was at your last business function meeting, tremendous amount of things have happened, as we all know. And like Dr. Phillips was saying, there's a big priority, which is to get our students educated. So is that too much to be asking them to get done, before Monday or whatever day, like in light of everything that the pressure that they're under, where the priority is how to get curriculum and educate our students. So
no, this was asked for on the 31st. And I hear you guys mentioning dates in February. This budget reduction process started last November. It is, and on top of that, I thought it was already communicated to us that this was not going to be as large as we thought it was in terms of these reductions. But I really thought that this was going to be far more extensive than a couple 100,000. And I hear you saying underneath $1 million. And, you know, I don't really feel like that's in the spirit of what the goals were at the beginning of this year. And I don't want to be speaking on behalf of the Business Functions Committee, because I'm one of those people, not all of that committee. But and maybe I need to bite my tongue a little bit and just process this a little bit more. But I guess at this point, I'm just a little bit frustrated, because I thought that this was going to be a lot more extensive, and to allow the board to have a greater understanding of how we were going to move forward in the long term with some of these things, not just this year. Now, I know that the focus was to be this year, reductions in this year's budget, but it was my understanding that these were going to be long-term cuts, where we were going to be making changes to the way that the budget is built. And I don't hear that. And maybe that was just my expectation that wasn't clearly communicated. But, you know, I feel like I've been trying to be very clear about the communications that I've done. And I feel like every time that I've made those, I've tried to look for support from Dave and John, especially, in saying that the business committee wants to do this. Am I hearing that right? And I guess, you know, this is beneath my expectations. And I want to be fair, because I don't want my expectations to be what the committee's expectations were. So I'm looking to Dave and John to chime in on this, because I think at this point, I need to just maybe take a step back and think about it a little bit more now.
Well, go ahead, John.
Thanks, Dave. I just wanted to offer a personal comment. I've worked 14-hour days in ongoing crisis situations. It's not fun. And I would not mind if we took an extra week to have this production produced in light of what Sharon just said, that our job one is shifting gears from a classroom educational program to an online educational program, and our administrators are driving that. And I have a soft spot in my heart for someone who has to work 14-hour days to get that done. And so that's my input on this point.
Yeah, and I would agree with John. You know, I can only imagine the frustration and the anxiety that goes along with what folks are trying to deal with these past 3 or 4 weeks. But what I would suggest, maybe, Hunter, is we go back and look at one of our more important documents. I think, you know, the Business Functions Committee put together kind of a goals document to make sure that really the direction we're going is consistent with that. And I know the bottom line really is we established a sort of a marker in terms of what we expected the budget to look like in terms of total costs. And, you know, my hope is that we come really close to that, and that and I think part of what I hope we see is, you know, the thinking that went into that, the factors that were able to, the various items that were able to be addressed to be able to bring the budget down to that area. I mean, we started out several $1 million beyond that $80 million. And I'm hopeful that when this is all said and done, that the goal is probably more important than the product, you know, which is let's make sure that we get as close to that 80 million as we can, because I think that was the primary, that should serve as the primary catalyst for everything that we've been trying to do, and the details of how we got there, I think, are important to know. But the final end product is really the total amount.
And from that initial conversation, you know, unless I misunderstood, my understanding with regard to budget reduction was that this presentation that was being put together, to back onto what Dave mentioned, was to address how we were going to reduce for the next school year, not necessarily 4 to 5 years out, because there are so many factors that we don't know at this point. You know, unless I misunderstood Mr. Ahrens, that was my understanding, was that it was about budget reduction for the coming school year, and how we were going about meeting that target that was set for us, you know, in terms of reaching that figure.
Well, just to follow up on that specifically, my expectation, and maybe this was not well communicated, my expectation for that was going to be that these cuts were going to be permanent cuts and that they weren't just going to be one-offs for this next year. That was my expectation, and that's maybe what I'm referring to in terms of the longer term implications of this. So, you know, I don't know if that was clearly made, and I don't want to speak for Dave or John in saying that that was our guidance through that.
Well, a lot of them are permanent if they are going to be supported.
Yeah, I think what I saw a lot of cuts that were in the, for instance, in the technology area. And, you know, one of the ironies is we're relying heavily on technology, you know, right now, you know, in this crisis situation. But I don't think that necessarily means that going forward, for instance, you know, the one-to-one program K to 4, should that be reconsidered in light of the pandemic? I don't necessarily think so. I think, you know, folks who have already kind of weighed in on the whole K to 4 one-on-one program, or, you know, we're trying to communicate an idea that this is something that systemically probably needs to be rethought, just because of the over-reliance on technology at a very young age. But I think there are some other things, as Ann said, that I think are going to have some permanent impact, and I think hopefully that's what we'll see, Hunter, in the presentation. We'll see which one of those, or those that are presented as cuts, which ones are enduring, what's going to stay.
Should we delay that presentation until the voting meeting?
I think we should.
I agree.
The situation is changing daily, so let's recognize that, and I don't think another week is going to hurt anything.
Sharon, did you want to add something?
With that, to give them more time. So if another week, you know, is enough, then I at least give them another week to do what you want them to do.
And do you have any concerns with that?
The adoption of the proposed final budget is May 12th. I do know that some business managers have expressed concern about the Act 1 timeline and having to adopt that proposed final more than 30 days ahead of your final budget. They're looking for some flexibility there. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but I am working on it in between everything else, and I'm hoping to provide it well in advance of the 21st. Now on the 14th, I can, and it was planned to do the long range projection, but that's based upon, well, I could do it two different ways, based upon, you know, what we looked at on the 31st, and then possibly an update on the 21st, you know, after I've presented the summary review of this recommended cuts. You know, I mean, that's just going to be one number, a reduction number. So the 14th, the 5-year projection based on the 31st numbers with some additional reductions, which, you know, as I work with administrators, I mean, they're smaller, but then the larger ones, you know, on the 21st. With the video provided, you know, early next week.
Okay. Can we target the 19th as the drop dead date for that video? That would be the
Yes.
Sunday before the voting meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and do that? You know, and I apologize for kind of blowing up there. You know, I know that you guys have a whole lot more to be frustrated and angst about than I do. And I don't mean to throw more on your back, and I certainly don't want to be seen as inflexible. I guess, you know, my concern is trying to meet the schedule as we have it. And yeah.
Yeah, I apologize as well.
And at the workshop committee, would you be able to kind of give us, I mean, and I wouldn't go into any detail to prepare this, but if you could just give us your insights as to what we're looking at in terms of potential impact on revenue in general, you know, federal, state, local. I mean, maybe just a real orientation for the rest of the board based on what you know at the time. Because I know, you know, the information is coming in sort of incrementally, a little bit at a time. But yeah, I'd just like to know what you know next Tuesday, if possible.
Sure, that was the plan, to give you not a worst, well, I'll call it a worst case scenario, which I don't know what that worst case is yet, but maybe my plan is to look back at years following 2008-9 and looking at that trend and applying it to next year's projections.
Yeah. Okay.
And I also want to make sure that we have this communicated well. You know, my expectation for that video is also that Patrick and Bob, you guys are playing a big part in helping us understand what the implications of any of those cuts will be to our academic program, because I know that's a question that many of the board members have. And I didn't not hear you guys say that. I just want to make sure that that is clearly defined. Okay.
I guess my question is,
then if there is no other business,
what is the goal? Because we were given a figure to hit. Is that now not the goal? Because we're already discussed it, and I think we're at that goal. We're very, very close to it.
Yeah. Well, and I would look for you to, you know, make some best judgment on this as well. I mean, I would certainly want to see it go farther, so we have different options. But on the same token, if the district isn't going to raise taxes this year, which you've heard from some board members already, then we're going to have a much more significant deficit than we're talking about if we do a tax increase. And if the state were to change the law and not permit a tax increase this year, that would be even more devastating. Because we could potentially, and maybe I'm doing funny numbers in my head here, but we're looking at $2.5 million deficit at that point. And that's going to be very challenging. And that could really affect our fund balance past what our 8% threshold is for what we want to keep on a fund balance year to year. So that'd be my answer. It's not a clean answer. It's not a clear, what is that goal going to be? But in light of this situation, my suspicion is that there's going to be a lot of hesitancy around raising taxes to some degree, if at all.
We will give options.
Does anybody want to add anything else before we close?
Nope.
All right. I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. I expect that some of us are going to leave frustrated a little bit tonight, but truly, I really appreciate what you guys are doing. That you guys are being flexible through this process, that you're working hard, and that they're continuing the operation of the district. And I don't want to see that as being lost from some of my frustration right now. And I'll certainly work on myself and see where I need to reevaluate where my expectations are for going forward as well. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
See you guys.
Good night.
Bye.
Be safe. Stay well.
Okay. And do you want to just stop the YouTube stream?